If I got a problem, you're the first one to know. But my feelings keep changing like stations on the radio. Oh, people act like I'm the mess, waiting for a good side to show. Well, ooh, you already know. Piece of me is fading. I've had a change of heart. And many days are wasted before the space gets dark. Oh, I wanna give myself the best, but finding the time gets hard. Well, ooh, you already know. Well, ooh, you already know. All the bad dreams come and go. All the bad days come and go. All the bad dreams come and go. All the bad days come and go.
Hey everyone, I'm Greg Staley of Diverge Media. And Broderick's muted himself. Off to a hot start again.
I'm Broderick Bissey.
Yeah, so tonight we have an interesting show. Obviously, we like to go through what's just in the news that catches our eye. But today was an interesting day in Canadian history. Liberal MP, her name escapes me, we'll pull it up here in a minute, but a Liberal MP tabled a bill for universal basic income in Canada today. So it's been put forward, and we'll talk about some connections to other government literature that kind of show that this isn't something new to the Liberal Party. In fact, it's been mentioned in other reports before. We also talk about the Trudeau government's ties to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and how they've mentioned that their poverty reduction strategy is actually directly in line with the United Nations. And then we got a bunch of stuff on Twitter. Canadian Tire's blowing up right now for all the wrong reasons. Broderick's going to introduce that. I don't really know what to say about it, but basically it'll be a reaction video together, because I haven't really seen it all the way through yet. I've watched a bit of it. But Canada's a mess right now. Seeing what's happening, we'll talk about it. But the universal basic income, we can't afford what we have done to the economy now. And now the government's using the turmoil of what's happening. And I'll get your take on this, Broderick, before we go into the actual article from today. But the government, in my opinion, is using the turmoil of what's happening now to be able to push an agenda that they were interested in pushing before. Universal basic income is not a policy that's new to the Liberal Party. It's something that's been floated around for a while, but now it's starting to be seriously considered, and it's officially tabled. But I feel like they're using the turmoil of everything going around, and people kind of being asleep at the wheel to push for it again. Because if this was an election platform promise of universal basic income, it would rightfully probably get picked apart in the media, among politicians, and rightfully so, because we couldn't afford it before all of this happened, and we definitely can't afford it now. But that's my take. What's your thoughts on the timing of this project?
Well, it couldn't be more than perfect with, like you said, the financial, like everyone's really like, I think there was a report that a lot of Canadians are in credit card debt. I don't know the exact numbers, but a lot of Canadians are in debt at the moment. And like Leo Young said in the comments here, yay, free stuff. But I parts of me like to think that he's trying to make us bankrupt or trying to make us the next Greece or something. Like, it doesn't look good. And if it does go through, yay, free. But it's not free. Like, we're already paying for the debt that this government has created, and it's awful. And I don't know.
Well, I'll give you something on that here. Okay, you got my share screen, right? So I said Unifor, I did the Build Back Better story where they were speaking about kind of their fiscal update. Like they were kind of, I think they were they were telling the government kind of what they wanted. But anyways, when I stumbled on that story, there was something on their website called myth busting, and I thought it was actually pretty funny. So I got the screen up here. So this is Unifor Build Back Better. You can see hashtag Build Back Better in the left here. They got their roadmap to Build Back Better. This is according to Unifor, one of the larger unions in Canada, representing over 300,000 Canadian workers. But here's what they say. In the face of the coronavirus pandemic, governments around the world are facing unprecedented amounts of money in protecting public health and preventing total economic collapse. So they go on to say, in order to address some of these questions, they're talking about raising many questions. Can we afford this? How will we pay for it? They say, this is Unifor. Oh my goodness. Now is exactly the right time for government to be spending extraordinary amounts of money. Canada and the rest of the world, and they go on to use the Great Depression as the justification, saying right now we're in bad shape. So it's like, let's make it worse. As a result, they're trying to compare something. We put ourselves in this position. The Depression wasn't a result of forced closures of businesses. But that's just, okay, so that's myth one, spending, and I got one more. Myth two, budget. So this is what they say. Listen, governments are like households, okay? Just like mine. This is the myth they're busting. We all have to live within our means. We can't just go around buying things we can't afford. This is Unifor trying to debunk that myth. First off,
that makes perfect sense in my head. Just
yeah, and I was just going to say, isn't that pretty logical, sensible advice? But here's what Unifor's response is, and I bring it up because I feel like Unifor's understanding of finances is the same as our government's, and I refer back to the universal basic income. But they say this is a popular viewpoint that has been floating for decades. You should be aware that it is a red herring, an argument designed to be misleading or distracting. Government finances differ from household budgets in many important ways. For starters, and unlike households, governments can raise money through various instruments, including by raising taxes. The ability to raise revenue is one of the reasons credit rating agencies give Canada such a high rating. Listen to this, their advice. Our taxes are low, and there is room to grow them without hurting the economy. Okay, high five, everyone. We can spend extraordinary amounts of money, according to Unifor, because our taxes, according to Unifor, are low in Canada, and we can afford to raise them without hurting the economy. I think every Canadian pretty much around the world would disagree with you. But they're talking, okay, here's another one, talking about the debt. The debt's about to hit $1 trillion. They say, no question, that's a lot of money. But instead of the doomsday scenarios, we need to start thinking about why the debt is growing so quickly and what these new funds are accomplishing. They then go on to tout the government's basically all the different programs they've injected finances into, including CERB and CEWS. And then they say, who's in the better? They literally quote government talk points. Well, we just shouldered the debt so that the Canadian population didn't have to. You remember that one, Broderick?
Yeah.
But so they say the government debt, the fundamental question is who is best positioned to take on this debt, governments or people? government debt is the most secure and cheapest form of debt in the Canadian economy. So they're basically giving you the same talk point as Trudeau. And we'll relay that back. We'll get into it all together now. So on the universal basic income, they say, right off the preamble, immediately states, this bill, they state that all Canadians have the right to have their basic needs met, to participate fully in society, and to live with dignity regardless of their employment status. The bill also states that a guaranteed basic income program could enhance the economy's ability to grow and improve its productivity. Now, this is where you think a guaranteed income is going to grow its productivity. That would assume everybody's going to continue to work the same way. They like the justifications I've heard for this is that people will continue to work and then they'll use the guaranteed income to get ahead and all this type of crap. And they always fluff it up with sugar and spice and everything nice right before you realize what you're really getting, what the deal really looks like.
I mean, what really happens with what's it called, welfare programs? Well, I would say some of them do need that. I'd say it also has been a very abused program, and I think you can't have something like this and not expect it to be abused.
Well, that's the thing with government programs in general, is it's going to be abused. That's just the reality of the situation. Is you're offering a program, you're offering income to millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of people. So when now it's universal, of course you're going to get people who don't need it, that are abusing it. But the thought of a universal basic income, first off, it's really just socialism and communism. Two words that will get you banned off YouTube. It's really, to me, it's just those two things disguised as, it's like a new buzzword to sell an old policy under. That's what it feels like. Like, oh, it's not communism where we take from the, from the rich and get and redistribute the wealth. No, it's universal basic income where we take from the rich and redistribute the wealth. It's like they're repeating history, and people, they change the terms up, and people will buy old history and old policy just because the terminology is different. It drives me absolutely insane. Leo Young, here we go. He goes, my taxes are low, huh? Yeah, we agree. I mean, Canada has some of the highest taxes in developed nations. I don't think you'd be hard pressed to find a Canadian that says my taxes are low. So when we think about the tax conversation, it's not just income tax. It's also, I had this conversation with a Denny's waitress in the United States before, who thought she didn't get paid enough because she said your wage is higher. So I said, let's compare expenses. And then we went through some things like gas. I said, you know how much our gas is? And it was like 40-50% higher than theirs was at the time. And I said, listen, we pay $1. It was $1.20 at the time. This is when gas prices were high, like they are now again. And she's like, what? Well, I said, hey, we pay like 40 cents a tax per liter. And then we pay HST on top of the tax we already paid. And then this is one that people often forget. The travel to take the gas to the gas station gets taxed too. So the driver driving it gets taxed. The gas that goes into the truck that transports the gas gets taxed. The company that bought the tax originally that puts the gas in that truck gets taxed. Do you understand? Like the government gets theirs every time, every way, shape, and form. And now, according to Unifor, it's okay because taxes are low and we can just raise them. And that's we're in a position we just have to take on extraordinary amounts of debt because of the pandemic. And by the way, the only reason we have to take on extraordinary amounts of debt is because they chose to take on extraordinary amounts of debt because the political narrative was more convenient for them that way. Because when we look at a Sweden and we look at their case count, we look at their death count per million, you realize they're below nations that locked down and had the draconian lockdowns like Canada, like UK, like portions of the United States. They have less cases per million and less deaths per million than the UK. I believe Italy's in there, the United States is in there, just as a few examples to throw out. And yet, not a peep out of the media. In fact, they get demonized and villainized. But
I was watching that clip of her. I don't know her name, but she was introducing that bill today, universal basic income.
Mm.
And
Speaking of which, I have that. Do you want me to roll it?
Yeah, I was in the Tim Hortons drive-thru on Twitter waiting for the line to move, and I stumbled across it, and I'm watching it, and people, I think people were like in the cars beside me in the drive-thru, and I'm just laughing. Like, I'm laughing because everything she says is basically a lie. Oh, it is a lie.
Well,
It's
it's
this guy's lie, just like, oh, this will
well.
be
Let's
good
watch
Canadian.
it.
I'm like,
Well, let's watch it, and then we'll get our comments on it because it's one of those things. It's
oh,
yeah, you got to see it to believe it, kind of thing. So here we go. It's 1:24. Let's get it up. You pull it up, Kate.
all I can say is very naive, very dumb.
Oh, assuming that there could be good intentions, it's just not a good idea.
No.
It's just not. Like, it's against human nature too. You're going to incentivize people for doing nothing, and you think that human nature is not going to want to take advantage of that. That's the part where you absolutely lose me in your reasoning, even if you had good intentions. Here we are.
Private member's business. Ms. Zarowitz, seconded by Mr. Easter, and I'm just going to check to make sure they're both online. Moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Establish a National Strategy for a Guaranteed Basic Income. This motion is deemed adopted. The Honourable Member for Davenport.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. It is my absolute honor to introduce into this House the following private member's bill, an act to establish a national strategy for a guaranteed basic income. The summary of the bill is as follows. The enactment requires the Minister of Finance to develop a national strategy to assess implementation models for a national guaranteed basic income program as part of Canada's innovation and economic growth strategy. I think it is time that we find a 21st century solution to support Canadian workers and for all Canadians to have an equal opportunity to succeed and to contribute. I look forward to the debate and to receiving the support from all. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Zarowitz, seconded by Mr.
Why,
Easter,
you don't think she'll
moves
get
that the bill
support
be
from
now
all?
read a first time and be printed. This motion is deemed adopted.
First reading of this bill, première lecture de ce projet de loi.
And when shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House.
There you go. So that's it being introduced there. She says she's looking forward to getting all the support from everyone there.
Sounds still delusional.
Well, again, here's the thing on the universal basic income thing. You need to understand why people advocate for it. People just see a break. They see that the system is broken and they don't really know why. And then somebody says, hey, the rich, they keep getting ahead. And this narrative they drive home, right? The rich keep getting richer. And then somebody comes along and says, hey, universal basic income. And we're going to redistribute the wealth from those dirty rich people. And it's like, man, their definition of a rich person and an actual, if we're just talking about mega corporations like Amazon actually paying the freaking tax that they were supposed to pay in the first place, all for it. But that's not what we're talking about. They mix that in, they convolute that idea. So here's Amazon, big greedy corporation. And then here's, Mike, who makes $1 million a year, who employs 8 or 10 people. And they go, oh, now Mike's rich. And meanwhile, Mike nets not that much money or compared to any other employee. And he's in a position now where he's getting attacked for it. It's unbelievable.
Oh, best believe that big corporations like Amazon or Walmart aren't gonna get, if this did go through, aren't gonna be hit with anything because they've only but grown during this lockdown.
Do you think Walmart or an Amazon or a Costco cares if things like the minimum wage go up? Why would they care? They can actually afford to eat that. You know who can afford to eat that? Small retailers and grocers that are independent, that aren't corporate, that are now so anyways, they've convoluted this big corporate bad. Oh, they make you think of Amazon Bezos types, and then they convolute that with the mom and pop types, and then they say they take the net income. Oh, anybody over this amount, they're rich all of a sudden, and then they start redistributing the wealth, and then you take away on the bottom end. What the hell is my incentive? Oh, you can pocket both. That's not how most people work, government. I'm sorry. Most people, if you told them, hey, you can make your basic bills, I'm sorry, there's like 30 to 50% of any population that you said, hey, you can still make your bills no matter what your employment status is. You never have to work again. You can still pay your bills, but you won't get ahead. Would you do it? And I bet you 30 to 50% of almost any population would go, yep, me too, yep. Over here, I don't want to sit on my ass and do nothing. Can I still buy my beer? Can I still buy smokes? Can I still go out and eat out every once in a while? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I'm good. That's where. And then they convolute the two and demonize, and they're convoluting two issues so that they can win the argument. But the universal basic income, we didn't have the money before all this shit happened. Remember when we talked about how big our debt was before the pandemic? And now, at the end of this, we are not end of it. Man, I hope we're at the end of it. A year into this, they decide now, after we spent as much as both world wars, now's the time to roll out this super expensive program that we didn't know how we could afford before we spent all this money.
You know what's funny too is that I think people called people who were saying in the past, the CERB's just a floater for the universal basic income, and they were like, "Oh,
and everybody said what? You're crazy.
And now
you're crazy."
Wow. Yeah, I know.
Well, and then this is the thing too. You remember when all this started? Oh, it's just 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And I said it ain't going to be 2 weeks. And a lot of people said it ain't going to be 2 weeks. This is going to keep rolling. And they I said they're just going to keep kicking the can down the road. They're just going to keep shifting the goal. Oh, you're crazy. You're this. You're that. It's like, okay, CERB is just going to be a foot in the door. Oh, we don't want people to have to pay back the CERB that accidentally took it. That would be awful. And why do they think that would be awful? Because, regardless of your employment status, we think you should have a universal guaranteed basic income. Well, that makes a lot more sense in that context. And on that topic, we're going to bring one more in here. You don't need to pull up the screen share. So we wrote an article titled, Canada Aligns Poverty Reduction Strategy with the United Nations SDGs, goal number 1 in particular, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. So directly in the poverty reduction strategy that the government of Canada released, they say, opportunity for all offers a bold vision for Canada as a world leader in the eradication of poverty, with progress validated in terms of its alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal of ending poverty. And I said this makes sense in sight of what happened today, that they're aligning with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, specifically on poverty. Because on SDG number 1, goal number 1, number 1.3, it says, implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including floors, and by 2030, achieve substantial coverage of the poor and vulnerable. Does that make sense? To hear that, your poverty reduction strategy, okay, they signed on, they said we're going to measure our progress and we're going to validate in terms of its alignment with the Sustainable Development Goal of ending poverty. And then one of the Sustainable Development Goals, 1.3, says we need to implement nationally appropriate social protection systems, and by 2030, substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. And then they introduced the UBI. It's like, I mean, how many times are you going to allow yourself to be convinced it's just a coincidence? And on that topic, let's get some questions here in the comments section. Get your thoughts on this, but we're going to go into a little bit of a debate back and forth here. What are your thoughts on a universal basic income? And I'm going to 2 questions, try to make it direct and to the point. Is it a good idea? Yes or no? If not, why not? So we'll go with you first, Broderick, and we're going to bring Kate into the stream here. She's like, oh no, I got to sit up. Our producer, I'm just keeping on her toes now. So go ahead. So do you agree with it? Yes or no? And do you think it will be beneficial?
I want to say no, but then I also have this other clause in it. I feel like with anything like welfare, it's going to be abused. And I was just thinking, I'm like, would homeless people get a universal basic income? Because like But and then I thought, well, people with welfare don't get drug tested. So, like, I'm not saying all homeless people do drugs, but that is a high inclination on
Well, it's the same
scale,
thing that.
right? Like,
Can I ask a question? Do you kind of draw the equivalent of the CERB then too? It's similar to people that like knowingly abuse the CERB. If you don't put those checks and balances in place, it's going to be abused. Is that kind of your viewpoint?
yeah, because I mean, I know people who abuse the CERB during like all this. Like, I know people who call into work constantly and just to reduce their hours, which I don't think that's how that works. But reduce their hours and claim CERB just so they could work less. People who I know would take that income with UBI just like nothing.
All right, and Kate, we'll go to you. So, do you think universal basic income is a good thing? If not, why not?
I don't think so. Like exactly like Roger said, like you said earlier, it's gonna get abused like the welfare system. And like just was said, what is the difference between welfare and UBI? I don't know how that would even work. Like, would somebody who's on welfare be able to take UBI, or will it just replace welfare?
So that is one of the things that have been discussed with the UBIs. Would it replace other social programs? That's to be decided yet. Like, we don't know, because this is just the introduction to basically say we should do it. This is all this bill was, saying we should implement a strategy and a framework.
In a sense, didn't CERB kind of replace EI there?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
And it did in the short term.
For a purpose, though. It was for the people who didn't want to take their EI. Like, say, Greg didn't want to take his EI because he wanted to take parental leave. But if he would have taken EI, he wouldn't have gotten parental leave. So he took CERB for a month, and that was it. But there's so many people who abused it who shouldn't have received it at all. I know many people. I think there's still, or they just received their last few checks or something.
Well, there's a bunch of people that are coming in the tax season that are about to find out how uncomfortable their decision actually was.
But for people who aren't working, I've got family members. They're receiving welfare. They're receiving CERB. They have no income. So what's going to happen at tax time? Nothing. Nothing's going to happen to them. They're not going to be able to garnish their wages because there are no wages. They're not going to be able to take their tax return because there is no tax return.
Yeah, it's essentially going to be put them in prison situation and get labor out of them, or you go into a UBI situation where you forgive the debt. So again, I tread lightly on these topics because I know a lot of conservatives like to just hammer people and go, "Oh, you commie piece of crap," kind of thing. And listen, I think a lot of people generally have a decent heart when they want to introduce things like that, but they're kind of naive in the sense they don't really have an understanding of what that implementation is actually going to look like. Honestly, do see, you can't, it's like the decline on socialism, it's always good at the beginning. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it feels fun, and then it's fun, and then you're going downhill, and then it stops moving eventually because you're just running on the steam of what you built before. And with Canada and the UBI, it's like the UBI might even be good for a year or two. It might actually benefit people. But when the currency is based on nothing and you're printing fiat currency and debt like crazy to be able to just finance the program, the inflation is going to run so crazy eventually that it won't even matter. Like, you could give somebody $1,000, but if you're printing money to run the program, and eventually the $1,000, what it buys is the equivalent of $500 before you bought the program, it doesn't really make sense. So this is the type of stuff UBI people don't really comprehend or take into the consideration is the long-term consequences of these things. But one more thing here on the private members bill. Do you think it will actually get passed? So private members bills, the reason I bring this up, private members bills historically don't really do well in the House, and they don't typically get passed. So do you see this one squeaking through? Roderick, to you?
just because it aligns with a lot of things like the UN sustainable poverty thing. I feel like it might just slip by, and I don't know if now's the timing. Maybe it doesn't, and maybe it's slid down the can gets kicked down the road, and then they introduce it later. But it might just get through, and if not now, later.
I could see it being just the introduction of rocking the boat a little bit, seeing where people's minds are at, seeing the reception to the bill, because it's a private member's bill, but it's from a Liberal MP. So at the same time, it's from the Liberal Party, but it's not. It's a private member's bill. So I just thought it was interesting. Maybe the Liberal government's trying to float it out there and see how it's received. But what are your thoughts, Kate?
I don't really understand what a private member's bill is, but I think given how everything's been pushed through all of this, it's just going to be another thing like, oh, why not? It's the perfect time. There's no better time.
All right.
I was thinking, if it got through and it was mandated and it was put in place, I feel like at that point you can't really stop it. But I would say if you're gonna get a universal basic income, you better be working.
And see, that's the thing. Like, can you just sit at home, or is it to help lift people up for working part-time on minimum wage? Like just what said, mandatory temp service anytime. I've been saying this for years that welfare, how many programs is there where they could be putting them to work? Whether it's farm labor or cleaning up our parks, cleaning up the rivers, like there's so much they can do to just put them to work and make them earn it.
The issue is anytime government runs any program, they're run terribly. So like, you tell the government to do something that hypothetically makes perfect sense, should be easy to do, they will find a way to make it look incredibly difficult, hire a bunch of administration and admin types that are not needed, and they'll find ways to spend hundreds of millions of dollars when it should have been tens of thousands.
Just look at the OCS, like the cannabis in Ontario, but they didn't make any money the first year. When was it the first year that pot was legalized? They lost like more money than anything. So you look at that, it's a perfect example, I'd say.
It's new, it's coming into the market, so yeah, it took a while.
But the way they implemented things, I think, right?
With UBI, you would need to have good incentive to get above it. If we already have the problems with our systems, so again, yes, it depends on what they plan to do. So if they said we're just rolling all the pre-existing programs into this one, and it's not going to be over the top more compared to what it was before, then that's one argument. But it does matter who you say. It's an opportunity, or it's for people to have the opportunity to get out of poverty. But the other issue I wanted to bring up tonight is also Canada's definition of poverty is problematic, and as the Fraser Institute pointed out. So in 2020, you have the basket test. That's what they're talking about here. They said that families of four in most urban centers in Canada would have to have total incomes in excess of $60,000 to escape poverty. This, I suggest, is not a reasonable line for poverty. It bears no connection to the understanding of poverty that most people have. Which relates to the lack of basic necessities. It bears no connection to the way journalists and politicians routinely describe people in poverty. It is predictable, however, that social justice activists are not satisfied with the level of MBM and want more items included in the basket. They suggest that they focus on real deprivation and employ a second measure as a goal for the poor, just as all nations, including Canada, did when they convened in Copenhagen in 1995. They say, I believe that we should want to know how many of our fellow Canadians cannot cover their basic needs. So they're talking about the definition there. It goes based off of the basket goods, but it doesn't factor in everything. They have complaints about that. So that's also the other thing is you could say It's the terms that they're using to describe things. So you could say, hey, I eliminated poverty in Canada tomorrow. I could just wake up and say I did it. And then all I've done is change the definition of what poverty is, right? They do that in government from time to time. It's not anything obviously that obvious, but they will change the definitions. And we've seen it constantly on the COVID narrative where they've changed the testing definitions, what's a probable case, what's a confirmed case. And we've just seen it consistently again and again. But we're going to shift gears here and go into some of the social media stuff that we have. Roderick, you got your video ready to go of the incident that happened in Canadian Tire?
I will get on that.
Yeah, so we'll just introduce this a little bit. Incident in Canadian Tire. This is in Canada. My understanding is there was an altercation between an unmasked man and masked staff. They asked him to leave. I think he may have punched one of the staff members. Don't know what led up to it, but we're just going to see the handling of it, and then we'll give our thoughts afterwards. So you have it ready to go, Broderick?
Yeah.
You are going to remove your hands from my person versus now. You're fucking watching me. Get your hands off of me. Get your fucking hands off of me. Get your hands off of me. Get your fucking hands off of me. I can't breathe. You're choking me. Somebody film this, please. Film this. They're assaulting me. You guys aren't the police. You're nothing. Get your hands off of me.
We'll skip ahead a little bit, yeah. I asked the majority of it. It's just, but I want to say, I can hear you.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I was gonna say, they're not social distancing.
Well, the immediate takeaway I have is that this is what the government has done to our society. This is what the mainstream media has done to our society. You've put people in such a state of fear. Businesses are fearful of getting fined.
Mhm.
Individuals are fearful of people who don't have masks. And now you basically put businesses in a position where you want them to do the enforcement that a police officer should be doing. Can we just all agree? I don't care if you think that that should happen to a person who doesn't wear a mask. I definitely don't think that. But at the same time, we can both agree, I think, at least we should be able to, that Canadian Tire employees aren't qualified, nor should they be in the position where they're forcibly trying to pin a patron of their store to the ground because he's not wearing a mask.
See,
I hope he sues.
it appears to me that they're security of some sort, but I've never seen security do anything like that to a shoplifter.
It looked like
A
Auto.
shoplifter.
It looked like somebody from Auto. It looked like they were wearing the Auto uniform.
Yeah, but then why do they have handcuffs? That's like one thing I sent off to the media relations was, is it common for security or
Was
whoever
it
these
handcuffs
people
or
are
was
to
it
have
zip
handcuffs? No, did you not see that in the video? They literally had handcuffs.
No, I couldn't see it in the video.
Where is it?
Again, you put people in this position where, like,
Right.
hey, you might face
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars in fines if you don't get people like this out. But my understanding, I wanted to bring this up again. My understanding was that there was a confrontation. I don't know if they were rude or not when he walked in, but he took it up with them as well. and apparently allegedly swung at them, and then this proceeded. But regardless, Canadian Tire employees should never be in a position where they shouldn't even led to that. It was like at the beginning of all this, remember when that older man who was in his 50s got shot by police because he wasn't wearing a mask? People said, oh, he should have just been wearing a mask. It's like, he shouldn't have been in a position where the police were even called for that type of bullshit. And here we are.
Police resources.
It is a waste of police resources. And this is the same thing. Here we are again. Now at Canadian Tire, you have vigilante justice happening within your country's borders because of the fear you've instilled in the populace. It's just disgusting.
Yeah, so they did have handcuffs at the beginning too. Yeah. So that's like the one thing I asked, is it common for security, loss prevention, whoever these people are, who are arresting him with handcuffs, to carry handcuffs?
Well, just make it clear, like, if he was swinging at the people at the store, it's absolutely wrong. But so is that response. And this is the thing about the mandatory masking in general, is you're leading to those confrontations. When I got assaulted in a small independent grocery store, it was because of the mask thing, and it's because it's mandated. And because people now feel virtuous, and they've made this narrative where you're killing granny and you're selfish and you're a piece of garbage if you don't do what the government told you is a good thing to do. That's where we're at. And so now you have it where you have employees doing that kind of stuff. And I don't even know how you get to the point where you're handling a person like that. Like, wouldn't you just say, like, okay, call the police. Like, if I'm the manager, don't touch him. Like, keep an eye on him. If he starts bothering other customers, then, it's a little bit different. But you asked him to wear the mask, and he didn't wear the mask, and then there was a confrontation. Like, unless it was immediately, like, wear the mask, and he swung at him, there was a confrontation that led up to it. He allegedly swung at him. I don't know what happened, but you're putting businesses in a position where they're basically becoming security and police.
But do you think anything will change? What if it's not mandated?
Do I think anything will change if it's not? I honestly don't think anything. Well, I think it would be a slow process if they took away the mandate tomorrow. And let's throw this question to everybody in the comments section. You want to type that down for everyone? If they took away the mandate for masks tomorrow, do you think we would see a wave of unmasked Canadians shopping around and walking around, or do you think it would be pretty much the same as what we see now? I think it would be you would see a markable improvement. You would see a lot more people without the mask, but I also think it would be a slower process than people think. I think there would be 70, 80, 90% of the population that would still just keep doing what they were doing because they were told to do it, until a certain point where there would be a breaking point, a tipping point, if you would, where they would go the other way. You think they would take them off immediately? And
I think a lot of people would probably take them off, but I feel like a lot of people wouldn't get the whole buzz about what's happening right away, and then it would take a while, like a week or two.
Well, I think there's a lot of Canadians that genuinely wear the mask. There's a lot that do it, no doubt, because they're fearful, but there's a lot, I think, that do it just because they don't want to bother other people. There's that element, and then there's the types that just don't want to get in trouble. And I think there's a lot of Canadians that's like, just don't want to get in trouble. It's because they were told they can't. They've been threatened with fine, and that's enough to cause most Canadians to submit. Like, most people just want to be left alone, and if they don't see it being a huge hindrance, they'll just deal with it. It's kind of like the joke in communist countries was like, they pay us to work and we pretend to work, and it's the same here. look how quickly people put them on. They'll do as they're told.
But it's not doing as they're told. It's giving them permission.
Yeah, see, and that's, I don't know.
Potatoes.
Well, if you don't give no, there's a difference. If you said, hey, you can take off the mask, but we prefer you don't, and we think you should keep wearing it, do you think that affects people too? Do you think there'll still be people that are jumping all over it? I think it would be a slower descent than people would think there would be. I've seen comments in comment sections of people saying, like, even after this is all over, I'm going to keep wearing a mask during flu season, for 6 months of the year. And it's become a fashion statement. It's become part of culture at this point. I'm not sure that it's going away just because they repealed it. I think you'd still have half the population that at least through the flu season it's going to completely change fashion, I guess, in a sense. It will completely change how we interact with one another, I think, for portions of the year at a minimum, even if it was all gone tomorrow.
Mhm.
They repeal the mask rate after the repeal. Exactly. Okay, so what do we got? Now we got, that was Dan Dix on Twitter with the Canadian Tire thing. So now this is what somebody said, and this is we wanted to bring this up. Don't know if it's true or not, but for the sake of trying to potentially tell both sides of the story, the man who wasn't wearing a mask, who had the Canadian Tire staff violate his rights like that, rough him up, and basically try to be vigilante justice inside of Canadian Tire. Yes. Okay, so they said the Canadian Tire story is making the rounds. They said, I've looked into it. We haven't. So take this with a grain of salt. The customer entered the store without a mask. He was told to put on a mask by several employees who he proceeded to punch. Well, see, this is where I read this. I'm like, what? So he was told to put on a mask and just jumped the counter and started throwing haymakers? Or was there more?
Apparently, I read the global news. This is being published now. Apparently, they're going after him for like assault or something. But apparently, so they had told him to put on a mask. He refused, and then they told him, "Okay, we're gonna have security or some employees escort you out." And then from there, I don't really know how that escalated. Maybe that from there it got escalated, though they tried escorting him by grabbing his arms. Maybe I'd assume maybe that's the case, but I don't know. Until we see security footage from the store, maybe that'd be better.
Yeah, and this person said, don't know if he has a medical exemption. I believe people should have a right to defend themselves in a non-lethal way. Hope, please figure out what happened. So, I mean, still really don't know. Again, it could be mental illness. There could be a ton of different things at play too. Maybe he genuinely did walk in and start swinging at people, and that was why it was handled that way. And now, like, you got to be careful because we're in an environment with the COVID era where everything is so heated that everybody's analyzing everything, looking to jump on it. And we just need to be diligent and careful and hesitant to jump all over those stories that maybe check off a box because of our bias. Randy Hilly on the matter. Here he is. He said, just spoke with the family. I understand this was indeed over not wearing a mask. Since when do Canadian Tire employees carry handcuffs for use on customers? He says, time to boycott all Canadian stores until these actions are condemned. Canadian Tire should condemn the actions of the staff, provided they can't explain it away. Like, was he going around assaulting people and we just saw the tail end? Who knows? So unless they can explain it away, there's an escalation. They should come out and apologize for that and try to ensure customers that won't happen again. But I got to look into it. Project's checking up on it. But allegedly, Canadian Tire is doing no mask, no entry now, similar to what Costco was doing, and not honoring exemptions. So that may be a corporate decision. We'll try to figure it out and see what we fall on ultimately. And one more here. NDP will not trigger an election so long as the pandemic continues. So all Trudeau has to do to stay in power is not let the pandemic fear die. It's just as long as the pandemic doesn't end, NDP will not trigger an election. So here they are. Ottawa NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says he will not trigger an election as long as the COVID-19 pandemic persists. Singh said he will stand up by his pledge to prop up the Liberal minority government on confidence votes, regardless of whether it backed an NDP private members bill to enshrine a universal farm care program in legislation Wednesday afternoon. So they want universal pharmacare. Universal basic income is not enough for the NDP. They got to show themselves to be different. Like, you want more? Well, we want more than that. That's essentially the NDP and Liberals in Canada, in my opinion. Who can give away more of stuff that's not theirs? The government is expected within the next couple months to table a federal budget, which would trigger an election if related legislation fails to garner support from at least one major opposition party. Let's hope Conservatives oppose it. We do not think it's the right thing to do to go to an election while we should be fighting the pandemic. We're not going to trigger an election, so that means any confident vote. Singh told reporters at a press conference Wednesday. So he's not about it triggering an election saying we should focus on the pandemic, guys. We should focus on the pandemic. Because, I mean, they've been just crushing it so far. Just crushing it. So I just think it's crazy. That literally means as long as the NDP, they're basically saying they'll constantly back the Liberal Party no matter what. No matter what happens, they're going to back them so long as this is going on. And what's their definition of the pandemic ending? Does that mean like the government stops acting like we're all going to die? Is that their definition of a pandemic?
Now, what if the provinces start lifting things?
Yeah, that's a good question too.
Because it's got to get all the provinces on board.
Did you see? I don't know who wrote it. I forget.
Hey, hold up. Hold up. It's getting too out of control. I now have to use an app to cross into Canada. Scans my passport. I fill out personal information. Only one question is related to COVID. Do you feel unwell? It's tracking. So they're now using an app to cross into Canada. Sorry, I cut you off.
Before I forget, did you see the it was like an opinion or something, and it was saying provinces or governments, provincial governments or whatever should be fined if they start lifting lockdown restrictions or something like that.
Okay, so then the reverse should be true. They should be fined if they don't lift. Like, they're going to be. You realize the government's going to be sued left, right, and center, right? That's why Ontario is trying to pass the "You Can't Sue Us" Act or whatever they called it of the pandemic when they started implementing lockdowns because they didn't want all the business backlash. You think governments have the unlimited power? They're going to have to justify everything they've done. Every business owner that's been put out of business, no fault of their own, is going to have a chip on their shoulder. And I would be joining as a business owner who went through that with other business owners, suing the crap out of the government, forcing them to justify their measures were justified, and if not, taking them for every penny that they were worth. And unfortunately, that means hurting the taxpayer at the same time.
Apparently, Manulife has said that if you pass away after receiving the COVID injection, your life insurance won't be paid out.
So
because it's an experimental drug.
So apparently, Manulife has said they won't pay out if you pass away after receiving a COVID vaccine. Yeah, so they won't pay out for if you die from COVID-19's vaccine because they say it's not an approved drug; it's an experimental.
No,
it's an experiment.
Well, they say it's experimental.
Is that with trials or is that with the actual vaccine that the government has approved?
If you take the vaccine,
that'd be, well, you got to think, and we've had this conversation before on the show, is it's not actually approved in the same way that other vaccines get approved. Other vaccines go through peer-reviewed studies. If I'm an insurance company and I'm looking for a loophole, and you tell me that you skipped animal testing, that you haven't done long-term testing, and that you didn't actually get the proper peer review process approval. It's emergency authorization use. I wouldn't pay out either if something happened, if I had the option.
It's just like insurance companies won't cover experimental treatment.
Yeah, it's like the equivalent of experimental treatments, right? Like they won't cover experimental treatments. A lot of insurance companies, it's an experimental vaccine. What do we got here?
One of my roommates' parent or dad and her stepmom got the vaccine trial. They got put on a vaccine trial, and they don't know if they got the placebo or not.
Yeah. Well,
they seem okay so far. So and they're old.
I guess.
So I hope they're fine.
No news is good news, I guess, right?
Yeah. But I guess we would have to tell them if it was a placebo or not, I guess.
So I wanted to bring up an article that kind of made the rounds recently, and we got maybe a little bit more for everyone here, maybe another 10, 20 minutes. But Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson actually shared this article out. It's an older article I wrote, but now people are thinking 2020's past. Let's make the comparisons. And so I was thinking this before everyone else was, I guess. And I did an article called Comparing Total Deaths During Flu/COVID Season. What do the numbers say? So what I did, I pulled stats from Stats Canada, and I compare the deaths for the months of January to April from 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. In 2020, it's not complete yet. I talk about that. But basically, I adjust it for the population growth. So there's a population growth and what's the total deaths as a percentage of the entire population year over year? That's what the article did. And so here you have 2018. You can see there's your one flu season, 2019. But then we get into the comparison. And this is where it gets interesting. So September, deaths as a percentage of population was 0.05836%. September, deaths as a percentage of population in 2020 was 0.03976%. So when you count for population, we were down in September, and this is the last bit of data. This is where they actually cut it off. It went to October 4th, and that was all you could get. But it's been making the rounds. If you want to check out the data breakdown, deaths as a percentage of population, year compared to year, it's definitely an interesting one because in March, we were in lockdown, were we not? In March, when we were in lockdown,
Mid-March.
2019, 0.06831%. In 2019, deaths as a percentage of the total Canadian population. In March of 2020, it's lower when we locked down and started destroying our economy and forcing fear upon the populace. It was lower as a percentage for that entire month than it was the year prior, as 0.06103%. So there's a couple months, there's some fluctuation and stuff, but overall, it's nothing astronomical, like over the top crazy. It's and then the other thing is when the death numbers finally do come out, it's going to have to be discussed because excess death might be up. This is something a lot of people that are hard on the, it's a hoax type thing are, missing on, because excess deaths may be up this year. You're creating a straw man argument. Be careful about it. Because excess deaths should be up this year. We shut down the economy. We took away all forms of entertainment and stress relief to everyone. Suicides are up. Overdoses are up. You know what I mean? So the list goes on. Cancer patients, the missed screenings, that should lead to, or not should, that will lead to, unfortunately, more deaths and missed cancer screenings. So what's the consequences of all that in comparison? They're not considering it. But there are many people that probably stated the government and their experts know best. So the question will be some who will stop wearing a mask right away, the rest no. So we still got people giving their answers on the mask. All right. On the how does it feel to be writing every day, pretty much? I want to get your thoughts on this. Let the audience know. Obviously, Broderick works full-time. It's pretty well writing every day now. So what's it been like? What were the adjustments that you kind of found yourself making to be able to reach the volume of content that I keep asking you to put out?
Well, your help definitely helped. Just getting home, eating, and getting to it, pretty much.
Yeah.
Less sitting around after work, trying to unwind a little bit after work. But
so he usually gets home 4:35, and then I force him to write till 7:38. And so our goal, anyways, if you're new to Diverge Media, we put out articles every day. I try to write one every day. Broderick's trying to write one every day. Videos come out Tuesday and Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern. We try to have conversations about articles we've written, what's in the news. We try to make it not only informative, but entertaining. So hopefully we don't bore you just with what we're talking about. But we're growing. We have somebody who does editing for us from time to time. Leanne, thank you for all the help that you've done. I know you've been clipping together a bunch of our videos for us, so we appreciate that. And then my wife obviously does a lot of the producing in behind the scenes. So yeah, it's been a journey. We've been at this. When did we start now? Over a year ago. Over a year now?
it was kind of like May last year, but kind of more so got steady in June, July.
Yeah, so we got started a couple months late. It's been an interesting year so far because in 2 months, not even 2 months yet, we're basically on par with all of last year's numbers.
Mm-hmm.
We had a big explosion to this year. to start things off, and it's kind of been building on that from there, and it feels like we're starting to get into the swing of things, figuring out what works, what's interesting to Canadians. Easier said than done. So there's some days, I'll be honest, I think I wrote a great article. I think it's informative. I think it's entertaining. I think it's important. And then nobody reads it. And I know nobody reads it because I can look at the numbers that tell me nobody read it. And so that it's been tough. But over time, you kind of get better. You hone in on it. And you get thicker skin too. So it makes it a little bit easier. But I'm going to let do you have anything for us before we close out here tonight, Broderick?
I could ask everyone, what do you think of Aaron O'Toole?
do you have the Aaron O'Caillou or O'Kai-Toole? O'Kai-Toole. It was bad.
This is a group chat a while ago.
So right now, I guess I'll introduce it. Many Canadians, especially conservative Canadians, aren't happy with the leader of the Conservative Party. Now, we were fortunate enough, we got to go to the Independent Press Gallery where Aaron O'Toole and Derek Sloan did a fireside chat. It was interesting to meet them from a distance and kind of get a vibe from them. But needless to say, I'm not surprised that I've seen Aaron O'Toole kick out Sloan and do some of the things he's done. It just didn't surprise me based on the vibes I got. And now that's all subjective and that's all opinion, and it doesn't mean anything about anything, and it's just one person. But I got the vibe, like, it's kind of felt like it was his way or it was no way. That was the vibe about Aaron O'Toole I got. And I got that vibe because you can go back and watch the fireside chat, True North put it on. But basically, when Andrew Lawton started to ask some tougher questions and kind of put Aaron on the spot a bit, you could see the body language jousting that was going on. And I pointed this out to you while we were sitting there, where Aaron I think he was actually kind of putting his hand out away from him, almost doing like the stop sign, telling Andrew to stop as he was talking, trying to interject so that he could get his point across without getting too far into Andrew's questions. And it was just an interesting dynamic. And then I left that thinking
the questions, really. He's doing a Trudeau type thing almost.
He's being a crafty veteran politician is what I think I called him after we left. Man. I said he was a crafty veteran politician in there.
Yeah.
But I got the vibe like it would be his way or the highway. And so there's a lot of animosity right now among conservatives within the Conservative Party, not feeling good about Aaron O'Toole's removal, not feeling good about a Premier Ford's removal of Belinda Carvalho's and Roman Baber. So this is the Conservative Party right now. And then we came across this the other day. You got it now?
Yeah, you want me to?
Yeah, pull it up. So I shouldn't have laughed as hard as I did, but I'll explain why I think it's funny after. Made it 20 seconds. I'm glad I kicked his ass out of 5 minutes. I'm Kai O'Toole, and I endorse this message. So the whole it's so stupid. You gotta take it.
If you don't know who Caillou is, he's this little brat who throws tantrums and cries every time he doesn't get his way. For some reason, he's bald. I don't know why.
I'm sure everybody knows
leukemia. I thought he was a sick kid's patient. That was the plot line I went with in my head.
That's bad.
Caillou's the only kid cartoon that you would actually want to die of cancer.
You can't say that.
It's a cartoon. Yeah, come on. It's a cartoon. Okay, so I'm sorry. Caillou is just notorious for being like, I wouldn't let my kids watch him if you paid me to let them watch Caillou, because kids watch Caillou and then they start doing things that Caillou does, like throwing temper tantrums and like crying when they don't get their way and just being generally mischievous. So then the whole joke is that Aaron O'Toole is Caillou growing up. I think it's kind of the takeaway.
Each
I had
Well,
last
that's
20
what I'm
seconds and I
saying.
kicked that guy out of finance. So stupid. It's talking about Palabre, but anyway.
I'm just thinking somebody should make it. Oh, you know who should do this? Take the Caillou theme song, Greg Wycliffe. If you're in here watching for whatever reason, take the Caillou theme song, run with it, and make fun of Aaron O'Toole. Please do it. I'm gonna
There's
stop.
often, I think about it often. I'm like, if I didn't have to watch my words and be respectful all the time, and I could, just be a shock and awe commentator and do what I wanted, the things I would do, but I can't. Like, I would get into video editing. I would do all sorts of bad things that I'm not allowed to do, including Caillou. Okay, what do we got here? Not boring, very well curated and produced content. Appreciate that. Grateful to have recently discovered Diverge Media. Thank your team for your exceptional work. Bless you all. Thank you for that, Shannon. And we do our best. I mean, obviously, you can tell when we run out of content and we're just firing off and talking. And we're almost at that point. We're pretty much at that point right now. But we generally come with at least 45 minutes to an hour material twice a month. We do these live streams every other Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and then we have our videos twice a week. Broderick's going to start doing pieces that are going to be included in those. So he'll do his little section about a various different stories, and I'm going to find ways to include that in. So we're slowly getting better. I mean, I wasn't a video editor or a producer when I got into all of this. Broderick had some knowledge from journalism at school, but it's not what you need to do to be able to produce professional content. A lot of what's happened is you get your ego kicked. Like, you go around and you look at other people's platforms that are kind of doing better than you, and you're like, what am I doing wrong? And then what do I need to work on? And you work out all these little things. If you've been with us from the very beginning, you know how terrible everything looked at the beginning. And it's just slowly gotten better and better and kind of rounded out, and the kinks wrinkled out. But it's good. It's been a slow process. But I think
Just Swan knows he was our first hero.
the original 6. What do we got on Ford?
Him and like Faye or something.
The what?
Anti-bullying.
Oh, okay. So Caitlin's got.
I don't want to talk about it.
Okay, then pull it up. So add it to the screen, and then we'll start talking about it. So it's Anti-Bullying Day today?
Yeah.
Is it today?
Well, Pink Shirt Day.
Oh, it's Pink Shirt Day.
Yeah,
Oh,
don't
Pink
bully
Shirt Day.
me.
Okay, so Pink Shirt
Before the
Day, I
show.
guess you don't both. I'll never tell.
I don't have Twitter. I don't have Twitter on my computer.
It's on Twitter?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Like, go on
He hurt
Doug's
my
page.
feelings.
Yeah, I more than once, I'm sure. Okay, so search Doug Ford. Sorry, he apparently put something out today. Where'd he go?
Well, no,
It
I'm
is
just saying,
Pink
let's
Shirt
talk
Day.
about it.
Yeah, it's Pink Shirt Day. Where'd he go? 5 hours ago, long-term care, our government's great, blah, blah, blah. We committed to, okay, listen to this. This is a perfect example of a politician's statement that really doesn't mean anything when you break down the verbiage and language, okay? Last year, I made a commitment to provide our long-term care residents with an on average 4 hours of care per day. And today, we are closer to delivering on that commitment. Well, so I made a commitment last year that I would do this thing. And today, we are closer to that commitment. So if they improved it by 1 minute, they improved it overall.
Well,
That's how
it's-
stupid announcements like that are.
It's like the anti-human trafficking legislation they put through. Is like
Mhm.
I saw the quotes, and I'm reading this, and they put out something last national, or was it National Anti-Human Trafficking Day, and then
Yeah.
it seems as though they waited another year for that day to put out another piece of legislation. It's like,
Probably
why don't
did
you
because
just
they
do
don't.
it right away. Like, if you really care about this issue, just do it. Don't wait till tomorrow.
I get a feeling like it's probably not a priority within the Ford government. Just be careful.
No.
Somebody was complaining they couldn't hear you earlier.
Yeah, no, that was last stream.
No, there was this stream.
Yeah, on Facebook. I don't know if it was the Facebook audio or not.
Yeah.
but-
Anyway.
Oh, there was issues on Facebook.
I got the Ford tweet here. It says bullying is unacceptable, whether it's school or work. Everyone should feel safe and accepted wherever they go, except in the House of Commons where I rule. Rah! Okay.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about.
That's why we're bringing it up. On Pink Shirt, take its stand against bullying by wearing pink. If you are being bullied, know that you aren't alone. If you're being bullied by Doug Ford, know that you're not alone. So to introduce
let's get it
that.
going in the comment section. If you can think of any time when Doug Ford has been the biggest bully, because I can think of two off the top of my head.
Randy Hillier, House of Commons, you're out to lunch. I don't know about the member opposite, but he's not all there. He's out to lunch. Okay, Doug. So somebody has a disagreement with you on policy, and they're out to lunch. Like, they're crazy. Yeah, and now you shouldn't bully people. But I'm going to tell the guy he's crazy because he says something that I don't like. But you shouldn't bully people. Hey, you should be healthy and take care of yourself. And look at these real egg sandwiches from Tim Hortons. And hey, look, guys, I'm at McDonald's. Like, it's...
Oh, and I love Corth ice cream. And one of you donate. That's not a bad thing. But
The irony here is we're like basically bullying the premier.
Hey, we're not the ones putting out.
hey,
statements.
I love food too, and as much as the next guy. But there's more important things to talk about.
I'm merely pointing out the hypocrisy of the matter. The fact that it's, one thing and then you say
like
you do another. It's
He calls out Randy Hillier like that, and then I don't know what the context was around it, but Andrea Horvath.
the
said
nails on the
that-
chalkboard thing.
Listening to her is like listening to nails on the chalkboard.
Yeah, he said, you want to pull that one up, Roger? There's got to be 10 articles, 20 articles, easy. You can find right now. He basically said to Andrea Horvath, and they said it was sexist. They condemned it as a sexist statement.
Yeah, they're
They
trying
said-
to twist that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go that.
He
far.
said, listening to you is like listening to nails on a chalkboard or something to that extent. I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Said this Doug Ford.
Doug Ford to Andrea Horvath, I think it was.
Doug Ford called sexist after dismissing criticism as nails on a chalkboard.
Is that the one? Yeah. So let's pull that up. So this is, just read the part about specifically the nails on the chalkboard. Skip all the, you probably skip the first 3-4
Well,
paragraphs.
that's the quote, but I don't know really what the.
Yeah. Just go down. I'm telling you, I already know how this article's laid out. I can tell you where, go under that.
There's a video.
Okay, there you go. Let's do that. No sound. Not really. I can't hear anything.
Oh yeah, I don't have audio shared. It's just okay. Speaker.
Oh yeah.
Word.
Read the quote. Read the quote. Let's go. I could.
You can read too. I'm trying to find it.
I can't read. It's not big enough, man. I have my glasses on.
When will the premier actually start listening to hospitals, to the doctors, and his own experts to prevent this province from going into yet another third wave and lockdown? She had asked.
Here, go down.
Ford said he has
There you
listened
go.
to the chief medical officer and has been sitting there constantly criticizing from day
Said
one.
the opposition leader has been sitting there and constantly criticizing from day one. The speaker stopped Ford when he made the nails on a chalkboard comment and reminded him not to address other members directly. There is no specific rule that bars MPPs from using language other members consider sexist or racist, but they are barred from using abusive or insulting language of a nature likely to create disorder. So saying somebody has, well, I guess he would be guilty of
Don't address them directly.
language that
Say
could
whatever you
likely
want
create
about
disorder.
them.
Well, again, do you? The issue with Ford is he'll say one thing, do another, and on the bullying thing, it's just another one of those things where we've seen him in the way he treats certain people, and then it's just it's like every politician's going to come out and say something. I mean, I'm waiting to get condemned because we haven't made a specific post on Black History Month yet. So I was thinking about, I was like, I should probably put something out. But then it's like, what do I put out? And I've been thinking about, Thomas Sowell, world-renowned Harvard economist, but so much pressure on everything these days, everything you do. But he's a politician. He's going to come out and make a statement of some sort. But I mean, don't tell people they're out to lunch, because it looks worse when you got to come out and do your political grandstanding and
Yeah, he
say,
looks like a
don't
bully.
bully, right? Don't bully. And then meanwhile, like in your political life, it's like, it's not going to.
Do as I say, not as I do.
That's it. All right. I think we are in a good place to close out for tonight. I've covered everything and more than I wanted to cover, so we're in a good position tonight. 2 weeks from today, we will be doing another live stream at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. If not, if you can't make that, Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern, we have videos for you, news reports on what's relevant and what's coming out. So look for us there. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and check us out on divergemedia.ca. And hats are for sale and shipping all across Canada through Canada Post, fully integrated into our website. You can support us directly by donating or buying the merch. We would really appreciate the merch as well, because it helps get our name out there and introduce people to the brand that don't know us yet. So thank you for tuning in. I'm Greg Staley from Diverge Media.
And Roger Busy. Have a good night,
We'll
everybody.
We'll see you next time.